All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm thrilled to have all of these mama and papa bears behind me. My name is Candy Cushman. I'm the Vice President of Grassroots and Communications for the Family Foundation of Virginia. Thank you for coming to our Parental Rights Day, otherwise known as Mama Bear Day press conference. And I'll just want to start with a note that the Family Foundation interacts on a weekly basis with thousands of parents and families all across the state, some of whom are standing behind me, right behind me today. And they all are deeply concerned. What we are hearing from them is that they are deeply concerned that way too many public schools have lost a basic respect for parental rights when it comes to the right to have involvement in their child's education process. We believe there are ways to take steps toward restoring that respect, and we want to talk about, you're going to hear about some key parental rights legislation today that is going to help bring back that balance. I do just want to mention real quick that I'm sure you've heard about some important legislation, SAGE's law that passed the House yesterday. While that has been getting lots of the media limelight, there are also lots of other bills that are equally important, and we're going to highlight at least three today that make it really clear that when it comes to parents' rights, especially when it comes to things like sexually explicit curriculum with materials either coming through school library books or outside speakers coming in the classroom, or just the parents' overall right to be involved, these laws, they feel like, are going to give them some more tools for dealing with that, and that's why they're important. The best way to protect as many kids as possible is to protect their parents' rights. It's to protect their parents' rights, because at the end of the day, it's the mama bears and the papa bears too that have the most personal investment and up-close knowledge of what it's going to take for that particular kid to succeed academically and emotionally, and that's why we want to respect that. Parents have made that message clear over and over in multiple elections across school boards, at school board meetings across the state, and now they're here to make that clear at the state capitol. So without further ado at this time, I just want to invite Delegate Nick Freitas to share with us about his bill.
Well, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for all the work that the Family Foundation has done. The piece of legislation I'm going to specifically talk about was actually relatively simple. All we did was we said that if you're going to invite a speaker from outside the school system to come in and speak to our children, we would like an email notification that that's actually going to take place, and then provide us some options if we decide that we're not comfortable with it as parents. And really what this comes down to is something that is so fundamental, I would argue, to free societies everywhere, and that's about understanding that children do not belong to the state. They do not belong to the school system. And again, this is critical. If we don't get this right, then it begs the question of, where does parental authority really end? And I think it is entirely reasonable to say that if you're going to invite someone that that parent is not familiar with, then just give them notification. And I want to share one quick story, because we had someone in testimony who claimed to be a former educator that said, we already have too much parental interference into education. And see, that's what we're getting at here. Right? This isn't just about individual policy positions. It is about a fundamentally different approach to the way we look at children as families, at education. No, we don't have too much parental interference into education, because the bottom line is the fundamental right to manage your child's education rests with the parent, not the state. To the extent the state is involved, it is to come alongside and assist the parent, not crowd them out or pretend that it's the government or the school system's job to remove the child from the parent so that they can correct them. That is not what education is supposed to be about. And the more parental involvement that we have, the stronger the educational system that we're going to have, the better it's going to be for the parent, and I believe the better it's going to be for the educational system. So I'm excited about the chances that this bill has, but we'll see what happens when it goes to the Senate, because again, we're not just talking about individual policy positions here, we are talking about fundamentally different worldviews, unfortunately.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Next, we have Delegate Robert Orrick. If you can come up and talk to us about your bill.
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for your advocacy and your involvement in the process. That's what's going to make the difference. At House Bill 1448, which I thought was relatively simple. I was a public school teacher for 39 years, And in recent years, I found out that I never, through those 39 years, knew what the book adoption policy was in either of the two school divisions that I worked in. And some issues came up locally, and I found out that basically every school division in the state establishes their own book review and audiovisual review policy. So I thought, why don't we, since the state establishes standards for education and for learning, have the state do a study over the next year and a half and come back with recommendations that would go to the local school boards, the Board of Education, and the General Assembly. And wait, in the process of doing this study, it had to involve school boards, it had to involve parents, heaven forbid, and librarians who are doing these decisions at the local level now. I thought it was totally innocuous, but when it came out on a party line vote in the House, and the House members, House Democrats railed against the measure because it's a mandate and we're shutting down free speech and things of that nature, I thought to myself, if that's the only argument you have against an open process that would establish recommendations that then at the local level would still have to be embraced if they wanted to, I thought, what are you afraid of? What are you trying to keep quiet? So hopefully as the measure goes forward in the Senate, especially with your help and advocacy, we'll find some means whereby over the next year and a half, everybody's voices will be heard. The Department of Education, and consistent with the standards of learning, will say, okay, here are some policies for establishing materials consistent with what we're trying to teach in schools, and then let them be heard at the local level for the local input as it should be. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you. Delegate Tim Anderson, tell us about your library bill.
So 1379 was something that we did on the floor. So there is a lie, a perpetual lie that has been pushed by the media and education that books containing graphic sexual material do not exist in our schools. And any parent that is complaining about books containing graphic sexual materials is basically trying to silence agenda-driven materials that might be in the LGBTQ narrative. And that has been the consistent theme that we have been going against, and the media has been willfully participating in covering this up. So with the graciousness of our speaker, I brought 6 books in from high school libraries in Virginia, and I read them on the floor of the House. Graphic sexual content. We had to excuse the high schoolers from the floor because it was too inappropriate for them to hear, and it actually would have been a crime under Virginia law for me to read those books in front of them. These are books that are in the school libraries. Now, this is not something that I did. This is something that my team did, and I want to be very clear about that. I would never have been able to read these books on the floor if it wasn't for the speaker and the leadership. I would never have got this bill through the House of Delegates if it wasn't for the team being right behind me the whole way. But what I did is something for all of you. There's a permanent record in the House of Delegates now, a video record of what is actually in our children's school libraries. And you can take that and you can bring that to your school boards. You can take that and you can present that to your members so that there's knowledge. And there's kids in here, I'm not even gonna tell you what's in them, but it's bad. There is a book that is called Assassination Classroom, which talks about murdering your teacher with guns, AR-15s. I mean, that is, and it's a 21 volume series in most school libraries in Virginia, and there's all kinds of graphic sexual content. So 1379 mostly was to bring awareness, and for the first time, the media starts now reporting what's in the books. The media reports didn't discuss LGBTQ issues at all. It was all about what is in the books. The librarians have fundamentally breached their core responsibility to our children to curate appropriate books for children. And their response is, well, there's worse out there on the internet. That is an insane concept to say it's okay for adults to say in this library, this is appropriate material for you that has extreme graphic sexual content. That would be a crime to read to them outside of the school library. And we asked that question, Delegate LaRocque is back here, we asked that question in courts. Why can school librarians hand these materials out and it's fair, but if I hand the materials out, it's a crime. And there was no answer to that question, because there is no answer to that question. It's an absurd concept. 1379 says this: create a list of the books that are in the library that have these materials in them, and then let the parents opt out if they want to. And that's it. That's all 1379 did, but it did so much more because you have it now. It's in the public domain forever. And so I hope that you use it for that intended purpose. I have no expectation it's going to pass the Senate. So you have to use what we did in the House for messaging purposes at your local school board level to bring awareness. So many people, even on the Republican side, said, I had no idea those books were in the library. Get that message out. That's what you can do.
Aside from Assassination Classroom, what other books?
Let me, if you don't mind, hold questions until the end. We're going to have a time for questions, so I can get the moms up here. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, let me introduce Susan Roberson, a proud mom and grandma from Chesterfield County.
Good morning. As Candy said, my name is Susan Roberson, a resident of Chesterfield County, a proud mom and grandmother of 10. 2 of my grandchildren live with me and their mother in Chesterfield County in the Bermuda District and attend local public schools. One of my grandchildren also lives and attends a high school in Fairfax County. I have always loved the Chesterfield County school system. I'm not here to bash the public schools, but I do think there's a need to have a better balance on the parental rights issues. I recall as a child how my mother was given the right to opt me out of sex education. But now, sex education comes through books, in the library, and other classroom subjects, and parents never know the difference. It's difficult for me to understand how schools have moved so far from a focus on academics and are spending more time emphasizing social and sexual issues in the classroom. I believe that the legislation we are supporting today takes significant steps towards restoring the correct balance. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, has made it clear that parental involvement increases student academic performance and overall emotional health. According to Dr. Carl Flesher, who specializes in adolescence and psychiatry at UCLA Health, the things that make them vulnerable are where they stand socially and where they stand sexually and where they stand developmentally. Let's think about this. Could sexually explicit curriculum and related resources be a factor encouraging children to experiment in sexually risky behavior? The overwhelming majority of parents are responsible and best know their children. This is why I believe parents should have the opportunity and the access to be involved in what curriculum and resources are used to educate their children. I feel in previous years our schools wanted to encourage more parental involvement, but I've seen them move away from that mindset. It seems they prefer for parents to stay out of children's school business. But when there is an attendance or conduct problem, schools want to quickly engage parents. This is why we need parents involved in all aspects of children's education. We should have the right to know what's going on and have access to information rather than to be treated as an afterthought. This is why I support these parental rights bills, HB 1379, HB 1803, and HB 1448. And I'm calling the General Assembly to help parents pass this legislation. Thank you.
Last but not least, I'd like to invite Tara Lawrence, a mom from Hanover County.
Good morning. My name is Tara Lawrence, as Candy said, and I'm a Hanover County mom of 4 with 2 children in Hanover County Public Schools. Our oldest child was adopted out of an overseas orphanage when she was 10 years old. And due to her early childhood years in an orphanage, she has a lot of trauma and wrong thinking that we've been working hard with her to overcome over these last several years. I am speaking today because given the challenges she is already facing as an adolescent navigating this previous trauma, it doesn't make sense for the schools to expose her to inappropriate, violent, or explicit content without involving me, one of her parents. I support these bills that encourage schools to partner with parents in protecting the hearts and minds of our children. In my daughter's first semester of high school, which wrapped up about a week ago, she brought home several books with content that glorified premarital sex and sexual experimentation among teens. Like many children, she was drawn to the covers of the books and therefore selected them, but she did not know the content that was in them. There are many great literature options out there that encourage responsible choices and contributing positively to our world. And we know as adults that what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, those things influence our thinking and our behavior. I want my children to be influenced by content that is focused on characters who seek the good of others and contribute positively to our world. I think we can all agree that our children live in a hypersexualized, me-focused culture. And we don't need to add to their exposure in a school setting without parental consent. Constant exposure to explicit content, it simply normalizes early sexual experimentation and activities that are contrary to our family's values and what is best for my children's development. Frankly, this makes it challenging for us as parents. And I know we can do better with measures like these in place that encourage parents and schools to partner together. Because we choose to send our children to public school, it does not mean we automatically relinquish our rights as parents. Too often, however, parents are made to feel this way. These measures would help restore the balance needed in Virginia public schools, and they take important steps toward giving parents the tools they need to make sure their rights are recognized while also putting parents back in the driver's seat when it comes to their children's education. After all, parental authority is a constitutional right that has not only been recognized multiple times in the U.S. Supreme Court, but also right here in Virginia in our courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Just to summarize real quickly, we are here today to express support for House bills that are moving over to the Senate on parental rights, 1803, 1448, and 1379. I do want to mention one other key bill that parents will also be talking about. In addition to those bills and Sage's Law, they will also be talking about one from Delegate Don McGuire, HB 1507, that recognizes parents' fundamental right to have access to things like reviewing curriculum, surveys that are given to their kids, and other instructional material. And just to wrap up, as you heard Susan say, these parents feel like they're being treated as an afterthought or worse, a hindrance. And they are desperate for their local schools to respect and involve them in the education process.